Hello and welcome to a very special episode of One More Thing. It's been a while since we've done one of these Zoom style interviews, but the wait has been worth it. We're about to speak to someone I've wanted to interview for a very, very long time. I feel it's long overdue. He's a man who sits between two very extreme but very passionate worlds, metal and drum and bass. It's none other than Zardonic. How you doing?
Hello.
Hey, there
All
he is.
right. Well, this has just been for, branding purposes because most people know this, but there's no way I'm going to speak for the whole interview with it. So here I am.
Amazing, amazing. It's
How you
great
doing?
to see your face. I mean, for quite some time, you were a mystery, really, and very much behind the mask. Was there a conscious decision to remove that and be more public facing and show your face more in recent times?
I mean, here's the funny part. I never wanted this to be mysterious. I just wanted to have something that looked cool on stage.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty much, I guess, being inspired by the metal scene. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of that theatrical sort of thing with which for some people is something they enjoy. I enjoyed myself. Some people don't, but that was always my thing. Like I had this brand, this logo that I made out of actually. It started because I wanted something like the Carl Cox logo. You know how he had his face and he turned it into something so iconic. I was like,
Yeah.
you know, that's it. Like that's how I'm gonna get people to remember me, like using my face. So I used my face to create my logo, and it ended up somehow turning into that. But that's too long to get into. But I mean, I never actually tried to hide anything. It's just I just guess the strength of that brand became so much that people look at this and this is still not sardonic. Like I can show
Yeah.
up on stage like this, say hello, and people are like, "Oh yeah, that's sardonic." But then I even have the luxury of doing that, going away, coming back with the mask, and then
Wow.
it's this. Like this is the thing that had that somehow had the bigger impact, and I'm cool with that because honestly I don't like attention as much as I like money. I'd rather have money than fame. So,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, definitely. You've got the best of both worlds then. You are able to, you'd be able to go to the bar in a festival, walk around the festival and not have too many people hassling you. The people who do
yeah,
recognize you are the people who really, really, really are into your music. So, you want to kind of pay them respect anyway, but you can have a degree of anonymity. And I think that's priceless, like more priceless than money when you get to a certain level of fame, I think.
yeah, man. I mean, I'm even like, let's be honest here. We're not talking like I'm not Lady Gaga. There's fame and there's fame, but
Yeah.
even at this level, it starts to like you start to bump into potentially uh unpleasant situations. Like when you go past that threshold, it's like, oh, this guy played such a cool set last week, and I like him, and let's say he's doing some good stuff. Support him. To the other side, where it's like you start
Yeah.
getting, I don't know. I've had some weird messages. Like I'm at that point right now
Yeah.
where people are getting a little bit too fascinated by the project.
It's the life that we lead, and I think we forget that sometimes. And I mean, I'm like, a million levels lower than that again. But when you get somebody who comes up to you and they start telling you about things that you posted about years ago, or they've remembered something and
Oh
they've
yeah.
remembered really specific details, and then you remember like, wow, yeah, I've made all of that part of my life public. And I mean, it's in our own doing, really, isn't it? You need to
Yeah.
promote your stuff. You need to get yourself out there. So you put some of yourself out there. People like it. They get into it. Some people get overly passionate about it, and they come back and feed that back to you. It can be really uncomfortable, even when
Yeah.
it's just being really, really hypey and positive. For a lot of character types, that's quite invasive, and it makes you realize how much of ourselves we put out online, really, these days, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mentioned that because that's something we're all seeing it, of course, with this new trend of how do you call it, cancel culture, I guess. I mean, I'm not a big fan of that term because I think like I guess some things are justified, but other things are like, I mean, who is this person right now, and why does it matter that he said like keyword said? One thing is said, another thing is did.
I
It's
think what
and
it's
I don't
done,
I don't I
any
don't get it.
form of divisiveness has taken away nuance and the ability to critically think for ourselves. The minute there's just a yes and a no, you know, an in or an out, a leave or remain, or any of these type of things, then there is no room for nuance, no room for discussion, no room for any critical thinking. You're either with us or against us. And that is, I think that sums up where we're at in the world right now, really, doesn't it? And
we should talk more often. That's amazing. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Left it so long.
True that.
But I mean, that's the world in which you've kind of lived in. You live in two really clear worlds where some really sweet spots, like the crowds that you play to, and they are huge crowds, even though you've not, you know, you play to these incredibly unique hybrids of crowds which bring ravers and metalheads together. So, you know, except for these sweet spots where they do overlap, they're two very, very different worlds. And your entire career has been about making those bridges and, you know, celebrating the nuances and the similarities that we have rather than the differences.
Yeah. When it comes to music, I guess maybe that did have an influence in me because, you know, my parents were, I remember my parents changing their political opinions throughout their lives, depending on, you know, the current situation, depending on what's going on in my particular country. At some point, they were both at odds. And even though that was the case, they were still very good friends. So I never grew up with this, like, dividing an entire family because of their political differences to me was unfathomable. So when I see people saying, like, I just listen to let alone metal or drum and bass, I just listen to neurofunk, I just listen to liquid funk, I just listen to crossbreed, I just listen to death metal or black metal, I despise that. It's something that I realize it's an inescapable part of the human experience. Like, tribalism is very ingrained in our brains, but I'm more like, you know, I guess that's part of my nature for not just in music, but it's something that I apply everywhere in my life. Like, how do we find the common ground? And, well, if I might be blunt, I think when it comes to metal and drum and bass, that was the most obvious one. But then again, that's how I discovered drum and bass. Like, I discovered that mix before I actually discovered, you know, what the original, like, jungle sound was about, like namely going back to that Spawn soundtrack when Atari Teenage Riot did that track with Slayer. I mean, that was the first time I heard like an amen. Do you say amen? Amen break. Yeah, that was the first time I heard an amen break, and this was 1994, I think, 1996.
Oh man, there were so many tunes on that. I mean, that really did. I think that, like, even people like the Lemonheads, it was something like the Lemonheads and Tribe Called Quest or something like that was on there as well. Yeah,
and Filter, Crystal Method, Orbital.
Yeah, that was a game-changing album. I mean, that must be like coming up to 30 years. You've triggered, and I might edit this out because I might save this now for an article to explore that and speak to some of the bands involved, because I'm really interested in these kind of places.
Maybe we should make an article about this, like the hybrid of, like, metal and drum and bass. Like, you know, go back to the first, like, also some of the first people that I heard that were within the drum and bass scene, meaning, like, not because I know Teenage Riot was a bit more of something more industrial left field, so to say. But, you know, I remember in the drum and bass scene, I remember 3 guys who had done it. One of them was DJ Hive. The other one was Concord Dawn. And then there was Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
And KC and all this stuff. And, well, and Diesel was pushing it for a bit as well. But, you know, in terms of, like, who was producing these tracks. And for some reason, it kind of went away. Then, you know, but that was right about when I was starting out. Like, those were the people that I remember. I think when I heard, like, Raining Blood, like, but Concord Dawn's version of it, I was like, this is perfect, you know? But I remember already saying, like, okay, this is perfect, but maybe I would also do this. Like, I was already sort of, like, drawn to think as a producer. Like, my track sounded terrible back then, but, you know, I had this idea, this passion, and I wanted to pursue this, and I wanted this to just be my thing consistently, because I realized not enough people were doing it. Some people did it for a while, and then they drift away from it. Then Pendulum came with the collaboration they did with In Flames. Then they left, and then Knife Party started. And I remember them saying something like, remember I was talking to El Hornet about it, and he was telling me, like, So when we play this track, it scares everybody away. I was like, that's good.
Yeah.
Like, that was my thing. Just blow people's minds, shake them a little. Because to me, that's what metal was about. I remember when I started listening to metal, I was actually pretty afraid of it. Like the first time you listen to some of these most extreme satanic metal bands, like we're talking about people who were like burning churches here in Europe. They had this really messed up vibe and the weird things happening around them. There was definitely an element of fear in it, and me being so young. But I remember after I got past that threshold, what I found was clarity and strength.
Yeah.
And I wanted to give that to people in the dance floor, music that keeps them awake as opposed to in a trance.
Yes, and not passive. The whole idea of fear is really fascinating. And you just took me back to like my first concerts were like going to see Pantera and Machine Head and Sepultura. And like, I was 13. I shouldn't have been in those crowds, but and all the people seemed so massive. And you could smell ganja in the air, loads of booze, loads of like, fights and shouting. And this was just in the queue just to get in. And Phil Anselmo, a scary, scary dude who is probably, I think they've tried to cancel him a bunch of times because he said all sorts of stuff, but deep down, that he's coming from the right place. Like I don't know where he's come from. I don't know where he is on the canceling scale now, but Pantera were a huge part of my musical thing. And that scaring thing, that fear factor was like, oh my God. And starting off at the back of the crowd and looking at your mates and like, right, okay, let's try the pit. Let's try the pit. And then people pushing you into the pit, but then realizing that when you're in the pit and people see a 13-year-old boy in the pit, they look after you and they'll push you, but they'll help you back up. And that was the moment. I am literally covered in goosebumps. And then I think with the fear factor when it comes to like drum and bass and jungle and like scaring people away, I think about something that I bring up in so many interviews, and that's Groove Rider. When he played the places like the Blue Note for metalheads, he would play a dub or anywhere where he could play the really experimental stuff he was playing. He wanted to clear the dance floor, and he played that record 3 or 4 times in a night before people suddenly thought, okay, I get it. He wanted to bring in that new element, which made people go like, whoa, I don't know if I can dance to this, or and but that's where we move forward when we're pushing things beyond the conventions or the norms, or otherwise it's just safe, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think safe is the enemy of good. And that's something that's like, it's a trend also, like generally speaking, not just with drum and bass, but it's something I think Thrasher from Prospect he mentioned this about how everything's like becoming so safe, and how he just hates that because I don't know. I think that rebellious element in music is important because it's what makes people think in a way. Then again, of course, you would ask yourself whether you really want people to think while you're trying to dance. And I know there's like two things that sometimes I think Justin Counter-Strike said this once. I was doing this one track ages ago. It never officially came out. It was originally going to come out on Human Imprint, this Boys label back then. We ended up choosing another one, but there was this one track called "There Is No God," and it was with like a guy friend of mine that was a death metal vocalist, and it was like "There is no God," and it was like a drop right there. So this was my idea of perfect like death metal worlds, black metal worlds into drum and bass. And then Justin tells me like, yeah, so how are you exactly going to get people this message? Like, there is no God, now dance. It's kind of, so he had a point. So that's when I started like honing the sort of like this crossbreed, so to say. I mean, I'd rather not use that word because crossbreed refers to a genre, but crossing this genre, this cross-genre experiment. I started to try and find where are the things, like which are the things that are common between, like how does this work? This doesn't work, so okay, maybe a little bit less of this and a little more of that. And I ended up, it's funny you mentioned Pantera and Machine Head, because those are exactly the kind of riffs that work really well with drum and bass. I mean, on the heavier side, but for example, the more complex stuff, like the super technical death metal, black metal, like you cannot make a remix out of that. I tried, and I just pissed a bunch of people off. It was just not.
But I
No.
think it is. It's that funk. And when I listen back to Cowboys from Hell, or Vulgar Display of Power, and you've referenced Vulgar Display of Power, Vulgar
On
Display of
Vulcan
Faith.
Display Face. Yeah.
Yeah, years ago. When I listen to these bands now, and also go into like bands like Faith No More, I hear what I like in electronic music. It makes loads more sense to me now as a man in his 40s who really understands his music of how I've got to this point by listening to those early bands and thinking, right, it was those chord structures, it was those grooves, it was that funk, it was the funk. And when you kind of this like looking back, you can join the dots, and definitely like it's definitely Machine Head and Pantera had that real kind of groove, which anybody who came from that world, when you played them drum and bass at the right time, would understand it completely. The energy, the fierceness of it, and then the loyalty, the tribalism. You mentioned tribes earlier. That kind of tribalism. That's something that's really similarity between the fan bases, for better or for worse sometimes.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. I mean, to be fair, tribalism, like I said, it's not like I'm suddenly some superior being that's telling everyone that it's wrong to be tribal. Being tribal is in everyone's nature, as in, and because it's what helps us survive. Like I definitely felt safer and stronger when I was hanging out wearing like, I don't know, a Cannibal Corpse t-shirt joined by 500 people who are wearing the same, because I knew we would not do anything to each other and everyone would just look at us with fear. It's like, oh, this is great. This is safe. Nobody's going to touch us. So tribalism does help for survival. The thing is that very same thing that helps us for survival at some point works against it. That's what we're seeing happening right now. I'm not sure how deep we want to go into that. It's a bit of a sad topic for me, actually, because
Yeah,
I
I
have
think
so
so.
many fans in Russia and Ukraine that I love, so many friends that I love.
Yeah, hugely. And that divisiveness is
Pirate
cut
Station,
itself
man.
away. Yeah.
I mean,
I think so. And I mean, like, I wanted to go back to the whole idea of kind of making safe or not making safe music, making dangerous music. There's a topic of discussion that's come about quite a lot recently. Deadmau5 has been at the forefront of it, regarding AI. And that now, because AI is copying humans and the algorithms are doing exactly the same thing that humans have done in order, kind of conservatism, and sticking to very formulaic kind of ideas and processes, that now is the time for musicians to really, really break the mold and break the rules and do something different, because that's the way that we're going to stand out from AI in a way. I don't know where you're at with that debate or how you feel about AI or anything, but it certainly makes me feel that this is a time now for the rule breakers and for the people who really want to kind of push things, because we've taken safe as far as we can. We've taken bland as far as we can. It's why all businesses or hotels look the same, or cars look the same, or products taste the same food wise. Everything's been boiled down to the most efficient and the most kind of blandest formula.
yeah.
So now is the time to do something dangerous and
Yeah.
do something crazy.
I love that idea, actually. I never thought about it that way. I'm hoping that whatever it is I'm doing right now, because I am also guilty of doing some things that, in hindsight, do sound safer than what I did before. Because, I mean, I decided that I wanted to do this. I think Deadmau5 is also guilty of that. I think they're trying to find that middle ground between what he loves, what his people like, what the market needs, like that little balance between all that. Like if you compare the first tracks he did, they were all like very experimental, out there things, and then he turned it into more of a house sort of tech house project. I love everything he's done, honestly. So I'm glad you mentioned him. I think he's a very, very good reference, and I would love to see him pushing the envelope a bit more now. I mean, I'm not saying he never did, because even I think within those sort of like rules that he set for Deadmau5, like making it a genre specific thing, we all do. I still think he was pushing the boundary somehow. Like there was something about his sound that you were like, this is Deadmau5 immediately. And even though I'm not much of a follower of it, I mean, I respect everyone's styles, every scene, but there are things that I'm more drawn to and things that I'm just not drawn to. And that was not one of them. But Deadmau5 to me was like, there was something about it. I would listen to his music very often. There was something that really reached to my heart. And I think that's also an element that's important in music, which I believe that, AI is just a tool. AI cannot replicate human emotion. And AI can replicate things that maybe will make us feel like a specific way. But I mean, I don't know. Here's the my take on the whole AI stuff is kind of like, it's true. I actually read this letter by, I forgot his name, but I know he was working for Google, and he's this guy that's calling for like stopping all AI development for a few months until we know more. And he poses the question like, we don't know if AI is self-aware or not. So that's the key thing. If we assume that it is self-aware, then we're already screwed. And I'm just happy to meet you, man. Like, we're already dead. We're just like, we're on borrowed time. I mean, I pretty much live every day just conscious of this, that whether it's the nuclear bombs or like whatever climate catastrophes or AI, or if none of that happens, I'm going to die anyway because I'm going to expire. So I try to live every day like it was my last. It helps me stay happy a bit. Ironically, that came from from the lockdown and from this now potential war we have right now. But when I'm looking at the AI issue, I'm not sure. I'm gonna vote that AI is not self-aware. It can act like it is, but it can never really be self-aware. I'm gonna vote for that. I'm gonna say it's a tool, and I'm gonna say that no matter how fast it is in processing whatever it is you want to feed it, it will still require human development and human decision. And at some point, when our, let's say, when our thinking capacity is hindered because we have somebody doing all the thinking for us, then I think AI is also going to eventually not know what to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, we've anthropomorphized. I think I pronounced that word right. We put human characteristics.
Anthropomorphized.
Yeah. And it's the same way that you would do if you were creating, like when we look at animals and think that they feel like, kind of sentient human beings and they have the same kind of thought process. But when we think of self-aware, we think of human traits like greed, like corruption, like all of the things that have ruined society since the very, very beginning. It chiefly greed is the one, like greed is the thing that powers all toxicity and negativity. And when we're saying self-aware, I think that's what we're referring to, whereas a machine might not have that need for, it might have self-preservation decisions that it might make, and it might not understand the value of human life, but it won't understand amassing billions and billions of dollars or pounds or whatever denomination in your bank account, which you can't take with you when you die. You can't do anything when you finally finish and things like that. But I mean, I was thinking, like, so we are going to get to your album in a moment.
I know.
Growing up in the 80s, for me, there was, and I talked to my dad a lot about this, they took me and my brother to a lot of protests. There was a lot of things about CND. There was a lot of things about nuclear war. There was a lot of things about, kind of coming out at the end of the Cold War. There was a lot of understanding that the world maybe had a finite lifetime and stuff. And my dad said, like, it always feels like any period in time, it always feels like there's these end of the world kind of things. And then when you look back, it's like, well, it wasn't that bad. And you just listed a whole load of things which could cause everybody worries in today's date. But you, growing up in Venezuela, you've always grown up in a very scary, uncertain climate. And I looked through some Venezuelan political history before we chatted. Like last night, I was preparing for this call, just so I wasn't completely ignorant of like the climate in which you grew up.
Yep.
And I think from birth, you grew up amid some really, really very intense political times, which have not given up. They still, it's still hard in Venezuela now, isn't it? And you grew up in that climate. So you're going to have a much more pragmatic view on what is a dangerous or worrying or life or death situation, having grown up amid riots, amid complete political intensity all of your life.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with the media, of course, when it's really difficult to learn about a situation of anything, like a country or any topic, really, when you look at the media, because we are all guilty of bias. So there are some things that when I see them from my perspective, I'm like, yeah, this was true. Yeah, that happened. Yeah, that not really. I mean, yeah, this happened here, but it wasn't that. So when it comes to the situation in Venezuela, I also kind of like went all across the political spectrum, just trying to find the truth, because that's what I was the most interested in. And these days I ended up concluding that all of them suck. I don't believe in any of them. I really don't. I realize that nothing works. Like not even anarchy. Nothing works. If no matter what you look at, nothing works. I guess no matter what system you could come up with, there's always going to be the human factor, and we can only hope that somehow we survive and we keep moving forward, and we are like as happy and as content as we can be, I guess. But nothing really works. So because I know that a lot of people admire Hugo Chavez, and I understand completely why. Like he was a very charismatic guy. He was a guy that he really led the masses, and he really did a lot of good for a lot of people. But he also did a lot of terrible things, and that's critical thinking. The thing is, because when you are a critical thinker, you piss off everybody. You know, because they want you to take a side. And I think people can pull up whenever I would say things I would, speak well of the government or speak ill of the government, and depending on who you ask, I am even either a Chavista or a kiss ass of the American empire or whatever the hell. I don't know. I know so much about the whole thing these days that just made me realize you can't even have a conversation with these people. Yeah. So there was a lot of that. I guess a lot of that actually helped the situation in Venezuela, because it emboldened all these two sides. It became a bipartisan system pretty much, when it used to be something more akin to what we have right now in Germany, which is where I live right now. People had to make coalitions to have a majority in the, well, what we would call the Asamblea Nacional, which would be like the Bundestag, the Congress, if you will, the Senate, right? Yeah. So it was a bit more, spread out, a bit more balance, I would say. Or at least I'd like to believe that. A lot of people would just say that these people were just like, just giving each other the money. So this guy, this high revolutionary, he takes half of the seats from like an extreme left party, and then it becomes the extreme left versus everybody else, who he calls the extreme right and the fascists. And it's like, yeah, on that side, I mean, those guys are there too. I'm not going to say they're not, but there's also like the social democrats are there. You know what I'm saying? On the opposition side. So it's not like it wasn't as black and white as we wanted to make it. But I think that's the thing. Tribalism is inescapable. Maybe, that's what he thought was the best thing he could do, because it's like, for example, he wanted to stand against, I hate saying American imperialism. That country's name is not America. America is a continent. That country's name is the US. Yeah. So US imperialism. He wanted to stand up against that. What happens if you want to stand up against an empire and you don't have the means to stand up against them? Well, the other empire is going to show up and is going to help you. Hey, no problem. We give you weapons. We give you bombs. We give you planes. And now we have Russian planes in Venezuela. Yeah. We're screwed, man. We are literally like in the geopolitical arena. We are just a pawn. We're a little piece in this huge chessboard, like a peon, if you will. Everyone's just look at this place like, it's a very, strategically speaking, it's a very attractive place for the US and for Russia, for sure. So whether those guys are good or bad, I don't know. I'm not a fan of governments either way. I would love to believe that we can work in a world where we wouldn't need any of that. But sadly, that's just not the way it works. So
that would be nice. That would be nice. I mean, is that all of that what led you to Germany, or was it much more of a commercial decision because it was closer to where you can get more concerts and, be an active musician, or a combination of all of that?
I guess a combination of all of that. I did go to the US first because I had the opportunity of getting a US visa, an artist visa, because I had a record contract with now Monarch Music Group, formerly Entertainment One Music. And well, since they were in the US, I thought maybe we can develop this into US. And they tried everything they could, but no matter what, it was always resonating in Europe and Russia and Japan and anything mostly east of the Berlin Wall for some funny reason. Like, don't ask me why, but there was something about my music that I guess resonated so much with Czech Republic, Poland, Slovakia, Slovenia. I just played there recently for the first time, and it was a packed show. They were like, "Oh my God, we can't believe you're here!" And I'm just like, "Really?" But if I go to Spain, for example, that doesn't happen. Portugal, maybe to some extent. In Germany, it's kind of hit and miss. But there are some markets basically where I work where my music works better than in other places. Like, I could play a solo show. Well, I'm not going to, for obvious reasons. But if none of this was happening, I would go right now to Moscow and sell out a pretty big venue just playing on my own. I mean, I'd rather play Pirate Station because I love the concept and I love having a lineup. I love how, for example, they had when they hired me the first time to play, like High Contrast was on the same stage and the same lineup. That's what I loved about Pirate Station, because they were trying to bring that together. It's like, why would you not put Zardonic and High Contrast in the same lineup? Why would you not put Technimatic and the Panacea on the same lineup? Why not? It's just because I love all of that, actually. I'm like, I love the music that Technimatic is doing. And I even kind of hated myself that, I have to, sure, like the brand of Zardonic now is like drum and bass and metal, but I had some bits of some liquid funk stuff that I wanted to try, because I'm like, hey, that's a vibe that I am connecting with at the moment, and I could never put them out because they would just never work. I tried. I did one remix. I'll give it to you. It was all right. It wasn't like I didn't think it was like great,
that. I had no idea, but I think you've kind of you've been a victim then of pigeonholes in that type of way, really, and because your brand is so identifiable, and you've pushed for it to be where it is with no help, and from the media. I'm including myself. I mean, with the last interview I found of yours was one that we commissioned for UKF 5-6 years ago, I think. This has all been on your own momentum, your own fan base, and you just slowly but surely, like the marathon, not the sprint, amassing an audience, a global audience of people who identify with what you do, with no help of any kind of trends, media, any type of mainstream assistance in any way at all. Really,
you're gonna get me emotional.
Always been an outsider, even though you champion two huge worlds. You've ended up as an outsider as a result of that. Like, that's the sacrifice you've had to make, in a way, really, isn't it?
And that is the sacrifice that comes with, not wanting to be part of the tribe. And it hurts. I'm not going to lie. It hurts, because I wish it wasn't like that. I never wanted to be an outsider. It was just more like, people are not leaving me any choice, because every time I'm like, I want to play this. Yeah, this is too metal. Hey, okay, I'll go to the metal festivals. Yeah, this is too techno. Like, that's their term for it. You know what I mean? And then I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm just going to have to go, what's the expression? Left out of field or out of left field. Like, what's,
right,
what I'm saying?
Yeah. Completely.
I just had to push them out. But I also think, I like to believe that myself, that I did everything on my own. I'm a one-man army and against the law. So yeah, it gave me strength. But I think that's also being a little unfair, because there are people along the way that definitely helped me. Namely, I think it all started, like, one of the first tracks that got
Policia
some level of attention, also because it it actually sounded playable. Like, I was still honing my skills. It's not like, took me a while to actually get a mix that sounded playable. There was a bootleg I did, sort of semi-official remix for 9 Inch Nails for The Hand That Feeds. And that white label, it didn't come out with my name because it was a white label and no copyright issues whatsoever. I'm gonna try to make that an official release at some point. I think, and now I'm closer to doing that than before. But you remember probably this white label. It was played by everybody. Like Pendulum was playing it. I'm not sure if Andy C at some point played it. I think Andy C was playing. He played Policia. Yeah. I heard that he played Policia and DJ Hype as well, which is another track that came out a little bit before that. There was another track that people liked with James Messinian. But
I would say that was a pivotal record for you, because you had like people like Diesel Boy saying you were one of the most important new generation producers coming through at the time. Really, I
was going to arrive to that point. Diesel Boy, man, to me that guy's my hero. And I'll be honest, I know I'm gonna probably like piss a lot of people off here, but I will just say this and take full responsibility. DJ Diesel Boy is the absolute best drum and bass DJ in the entire history of drum and bass. Period. Don't care. He is just like, the way his mix selection, I'm sure there's going to be someone who's going to argue about like 100 more that could be better than that. I know a lot of people never like,
I'm just sitting there thinking, oh my god, that little clip alone, that's gonna ruffle so many feathers. It's
I
gonna
know,
be a
I
good
know.
day
I'm
when we
sorry,
post
man.
that.
But the thing is, Diesel Boy had an approach that let's say this. Let's make it safer. No, don't make it safer. No, I'll make it safer.
No, don't
It
make it safe.
resonated more with me. The kind of tunes he was selecting, the mixing style, because he made it more like a journey. He wasn't trying to do like triple drops, quadruple drops, or the bam, 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 bam. That to me is the equivalent of listening to, going back to metal, like Dragon Force. All respect to their skill sets. I can't listen to that. It doesn't say anything to me. It's too much. When I hear sets like that, and again, no disrespect, because I know it takes a lot of skill. I know it takes, that's what's impressive about it live. But for me, DJ sets are about the journey. I want to hear a story. And that's something that Diesel Boy always excelled at. Like, namely with the Dungeon Master's Guide, A Soldier's Story. Like, to me, these mixes were iconic. I was like chasing him, asking him for those tracks. It's like he had some exclusive tracks that he wasn't supposed to like give to anybody. And I got him to give them to me, and I sort of made like slight updates to be able to play them. So I have like a little section in my sets right now, which is like sort of a Dungeon Master's Guide tribute, like sort of even trying to mix them similarly to the way he would, like 1, 2, 3 tracks from that mix and then back into something else that would fit with that.
Hey, yeah.
So yeah,
And
I'm a huge Diesel Boy fan. Boy, so
his mixes have always been a big kind of moment. They're not just like, oh, I'll just put you together a mix. These mixes were, it properly highlighted the mixcraft, as did like, Andy's Nightlife ones around about the same time as well. And I think it was Nightlife 2, and there was a Nightbreed, like he did dabble with that kind of drum and bass and metal fusion.
Ooh, Nightbreed.
2003,
What happened to
2004.
Nightbreed, man? That track, that was another track that that really hit me, like the Pack of Wolves. And well, X-Ray, if you will, X-Ray did have that loop, like and so it was, the element was there. I just think maybe it wasn't explored that much, and these days it's starting to happen more and more. You're starting to listen, like Delta Heavy's doing it, Moss is doing it, Pendulum just came back with that track with Bullet for My Valentine, which is a lot better than the remix I did. I'm so ashamed of my remix. I did it in a horrible situation. I hate my remix for Bullet for My Valentine. I had to put it out there. I'm proud of everything else I've done, but that remix is just, oh my god, it was the worst album, the worst possible song for me to remix. And I was moving out of an apartment after breaking off with an ex.
Well, you weren't in a good place at the time. This was when you'd finished off an album. You rushed an album as well around about that time, didn't you? I remember reading in an interview. Yeah, completely. Let's talk about Superstars, because this is a very, very, very different album for you. All your other bodies of work have had much more of a kind of political edge in terms of their titles. It's all been you. But this, you are putting the collaborators in front of you here, really, aren't you? You are celebrating. Last night, I emailed you for your favorite superstars. I was going to do some type of gimmicky question on who are your superstars. But you came back saying, well, these are my superstars, but that doesn't matter because the collaborators, everybody I've worked with on the album, they are superstars. That is why it's called Superstars, isn't it?
This is actually why. I mean, I can also mention influences for sure, but I think Superstars, the reason the album's called Superstar is actually referring to all the collaborators that helped me make this record, because admittedly, I was also in a difficult place when I did this, because after this whole like lockdown thing happened, I think everyone was in a similar place. So I realized that I was like struggling to get things done for the album and also, which is a beautiful problem to have, I just have too many things to do. Like, for some reason, I thought after the pandemic, my career was going to be over. I have to sell everything. I have to go back to Venezuela, just to, at least I can just, be with my mom for the last days of humanity. And then I started being hired to do soundtracks for the video game industry, which was amazing. So I'm like, I have to say that saved my 2020. That job alone was, wasn't a lot, but it was enough to cover me. So I was happy to be able to find that, because then I could get more and more into that industry. So basically, whatever I had to finish my own record, like think in terms of like, okay, I have to make drum and bass and some metal or not, or let's see what happens. And then I was just not able to finish anything because I would have someone ask me to do a remix, and I would have someone ask me to do a mixing master job, or like it was, like I said, these are amazing problems to have, but it does kind of keep you out of that sort of, how to say, creative space, because you have to deliver. Having to deliver changes the game completely, because you don't do an album because it's coming out of your soul. You're doing it because you could do something because you have to. Someone needs a remix. Add to ba to ba to ba to ba ba to ba. Wow. And then it's just work. It becomes work. And this was, as I said,
do you find then sometimes you could go for weeks and weeks and weeks doing mixing, doing all of these jobs which pay the bills, that ensure that you have food on your table? Do you find that sometimes you could go weeks and weeks without actually looking at any proper Zardonic material in that way, like creative material, because you've got so many commitments and things which keep you in the creative world? But also then, that's like me with trying to build my website, but then also having to write biographies or press releases or anything that, puts food on my kids' plates. Sometimes you don't get to the really fun stuff for weeks sometimes, don't you?
Yeah, that happens for sure. I mean, when you manage to make a job out of this, then that's something you have to live with. But I'm happy with that anyway. I'm happy with that decision, whatever sacrifices it takes, because I'm not, there's a certain how to say, there's also an attractive aspect to that, being able to just do whatever the hell you want and not caring about the market. That's what's at the core of the philosophy of being underground. The thing is, to do that, you still need to have at least your bases covered. So I am a first generation immigrant in Europe with no generational wealth. I have to make as much money as possible just to be able to buy my own tiny house, because the housing prices here are mental. So I can finally get rid of the monthly responsibility of having to, chase money for rent. I mean, it's still, I don't chase money right now. I have to admit I'm comfortable, but, even just having that responsibility, when you get rid of all this monthly responsibility, that's when you can be like, okay, I can just spend 2 years working on a black metal, drum bass, weird breakcore, whatever, experimental jazz album that's maybe going to be a total flop, and I don't care, because, my house is covered, my food is covered. That's a luxury. Being underground is a luxury. A lot of people, I guess, don't really think that. A lot of people that I also know are like at the forefront of their own, like, scenes from an underground point of view, so to say, like Dark Throne in the world of black metal. Like a friend of mine, I remember he went to Norway to Sweden because he wanted to meet all like his metal heroes. He did like a month trip because he wanted to see how life was there. And he told me, like, Fenris of Dark Throne was pretty much just giving, he had a day job, which was delivering newspapers. Wow. But, in a country like Norway, that's enough to cover your costs and have free time to do black metal. That's amazing. But you need that luxury. Like, do you think you can do that in Venezuela?
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, you could to some extent, because the value of our currency was so low that, I would just go and play once in Moscow, which at the time was the place that was paying me the best. Go back to Venezuela, live like a king for 6 months, because the currency value was nothing and the prices hadn't been adjusted. Now it's different because everyone's just, even though it's unofficial, everyone's doing transactions with US dollars. That kind of tells you about who's really, behind controlling the Venezuelan economy. You know what I'm saying? Even though that's a bit of a more left-leaning argument, it is the truth. They did it with Panama, they did it with Ecuador, and this is just something that's sadly happening. And it also happened because the government wanted to do currency exchange control to avoid how do you call it, the drain of capitals and whatnot. But it just backfired, and whatever. Anyway, I'm going back to the political.
It happens further afield as well. Having like traveled in Africa and traveled in Southeast Asia, dollars is still the most predominant. If you want to buy something and you're working in cash, then it's still dollars, even as far afield as there. But certainly within kind of Latin America and South America, that's very much the case, really, isn't it? So yeah, I mean, kind of going back to the album now, really, and in terms of you know, where you were at then post lockdown, this was why you brought so many other people on. And I mean, there's people from so many different musical worlds. I was exploring a lot of the collaborators. Some I know already, like huge shouts to Camo MC, who I've been chatting to for years and got a lot of time for. And I think
Love
that's
that
probably
guy.
one of his best tracks. He
Bless
really
him.
delivers, like the clarity and the fierceness of his bars with you, I think are some of the best things he's ever done, really. And if I was like, I'm gutted that I can't remember the name of the track, but I'm going to keep this in.
It's fine. Go follow me.
Follow me. Yes, there we go. Like he's on fire on that track, really, isn't he? Everybody is, though. I think you've brought the best out in everybody, really, in that type of way. So it must have been. This is a whole other, like you've approached it in a very different way. It's a complete paradigm shift, really, in terms of Zardonic and your creative approach and how you present yourself. I think.
I think this album had a lot on a personal level. I think I experienced a little bit like not like a full blown ayahuasca ego death, but I definitely feel like I experienced a bit of an ego death by having to spend 2 years alone in an apartment in Germany, not knowing the language completely. Like this was definitely not my idea of moving to Europe,
Yeah.
but it's what I had to deal with. So at least I tried to make my place slowly into something cooler, like build a little cool republic within these walls. And there you have it. Surround myself with instruments, synths, creative things, and I did as much as I could. But then again, here's the funny part. There was another thing that I found, which was good for my income. Oh, now I'm like really good with synthesis. So now synthesizer companies want me to do factory presets for them. That's amazing. So I have to do so many factory presets that I don't have time to actually work on. I mean, all these things kept happening and kept creeping in. And like I said, I'm happy about it. But Follow Me, however, was one track that I did do on my own, and that's all like pigments, by the way. Arturius pigments, and so some of my own presets are there. The main lead, that like the pendulum lead, I actually called it a glucose because like blood sugar.
Yeah.
Yes, that lead sort of like follows that style a little bit, and then there's a few reasons that are behind it as well. And there's a full list of it. BFS 9000, which is my big fucking sub 9000 preset. That's the bass I've been using right now with but yeah, sorry, I'm trying to
I
bring
guess when you're making those
Follow Me.
presets, then
Yeah.
you're creating the ingredients that you can later cook with, really,
Yeah.
aren't you? So you know that that's all work going in the right direction. Eventually, you're going to be able to use these presets when you find the time to write your own material.
For sure. But I mean, on the record, like Redemption was all my music. Follow Me was all my music. Bring the Ruckus, I guess, was like more of a 50-50 thing. Well, that Reese is from Teddy Killers. That came from the surgery. I had no idea it was a Reese from a sample pack from Teddy Killers, admittedly. But hey, it works. And if it works, then that's all that matters in the end. But I do feel like if he had told me that, I would be like, okay, that's good to know. We'll use that as a reference. Let me bring my own Reese.
Yeah.
But because I could have done that, but then Rock and Roll Tonight. That was a really old musical idea from Carl Sentance of Nazareth. Like he had this like little riffs, and he was just like mumbling about. I was like, listen, man, let's put lyrics to that. And I tried to figure out what could fit with this mumbling as far as lyrics go, and I gave that to him. Was like, okay, take this. Do you like it? If you don't, destroy it. Do something else. I wanted to give the collaborators creative freedom. Like there were some decisions that I had to make, of course, because the album had to move forward and it had to sound consistent. But I did want to give people, like, I would give them some guidelines, and then whatever they would come back with. If it was good, it stayed, and if it wasn't good, I would like try to talk to them and be like, listen, are you maybe not feeling the tune? Should we try a different idea? Do you want to come up with something else? Like I remember the original title of the Camo MC track was going to be Control, because that was going to be originally the title of the record. And then he just didn't like that. Like that word didn't sit well with him. I was like, you know what? How about this? Screw Control. We're not controlling anything. I want you to take this track and whatever this music is telling you, put that into words. like, let's help each other up. Let's lift each other up. I think we've been through, we've been through a lot here. We've feeling like constantly like we're about to lose everything that we love. We have too much war, too much conflict inside of our hearts. Like, let's bring people back to life. That's what I told him, and he did that. That's all him. That's what I just freed him from all constraints. I don't need a track title. I don't need to just do whatever you want. Be free. Let's celebrate that. And then he did that.
Yeah. I can know, knowing Camo, and like certainly from social media and having spoken to him on a number of occasions, I could understand why control would be too much of a negative or toxic word for him. He's a man of peace and he's a man of freedom. And he's a man who's overcome a lot. He's been very, very vocal about challenges that he's had to overcome in that type of way. And he's a very inspiring figure. So I could understand why he wouldn't embrace that term in the type of creative way, really, in that way. How about, I mean, you've listed quite a lot of collaborators. So now you're going to have to list everybody really now, aren't you?
Yes.
Even if it's just in passing, but everybody, like you say, these are your superstars. So tell me something great about everybody who you haven't mentioned yet.
Well, I mean, another guy that I really wanted to bring out there was MC Reptile. My friend Keith Thompson from also For the Flight Customs. He took care of like all my current jackets, basically. So we were doing this whole collaboration. Like, the word collaboration I took that really seriously. It wasn't just in terms of music. It was more like the same way I wanted Camo MC to not just bring lyrics. I didn't want people like, I need this lyrics and I need that. I need, like, if I'm rushing for work, sometimes I really need to put some degree of control. Like, listen, man, I've got one day to finish this remix and I need you to make me a Reese. I needed to do this and that. Go, and you have 6 hours. I mean, that's different. But when it came to putting the tracks together, I wanted the collaborators to also have to have a big imprint in the sound. So the same way that Camo MC just brought himself to the tune, not just his vocals. He brought himself completely. I wanted to do that with MC Reptile because he had a hard time doing that himself. Like, he didn't know what he was about. And then I just gave him some of his own references, like some things he had done in the past that he just never put it out there. He was just, messing around, seeing if he could do something that made sense. And I was like, dude, this is really good. All you need to do is do it several times. Like, write more verses, like do more of this. And then maybe try, like, I gave him some production tips, like try doing, like, I don't know, triple tracking, 6 time tracking. Like, you do double tracking on the main one, and then maybe 3 times you have a central one, a bit of something for the backings, some ad libs like here and there. And then slowly we built this track that just became a monster. Like, when from the demo to the final track, I have to say I'm really proud of that one, because that's the dance floor favorite.
Who else haven't we mentioned?
Carl Sentance, first of all, being the absolute legend that he is, Scottish legend that he is.
Yeah, I mean, Nazareth were huge. So.
Yeah. So I would say, like, to me that was a really, really big honor. I mean, Nazareth being, like you said, one of the bigger bands in the history of rock, freaking Metallica doing covers for them, even, like, that says a lot. So I actually became really good friends with this guy, and I had no idea what the whole thing really was about. But that was one of the blessings of moving to Germany, like being close to so many people that are making so many things happen. And my former neighbors, well, they still live close by, but they moved to about 10 minutes away. They have a bigger place now. They are a metal booking agency, and they also do bookings for Nazareth in Germany, and they also are doing the bookings for Carl Sentance solo project. And it all started when we just went out and hung out, had a bunch of beer, and then he said that he really liked what I was doing, and he's seeing that it's working. So he's like, I would love to try something new. Like, how will you feel about doing a remix for me? And I'm like, dude, that would be amazing, because that's actually what I'm looking for. A lot of the more modern crossover acts, there's also credit to that for sure. I'm not saying it's a wrong thing, but it seems like the metalcore, deathcore, and dubstep worlds, for example, they're friendlier together. But I'm like, no, man, I'm like an old school metalhead at heart. So when I have like the vocalist of Nazareth, wanting to make a track with me, to me that's like that's it. I can die happy. Well, I mean, I could die happy anyway, but it's it was a big honor for me, really, because he's such a humble guy. He's like down to earth, amazing vocalist as well. And even though he's not like the original vocalist of Nazareth, he's been with him in recent times. But originally, he was also part of Persian Risk, which is one of the original bands that was behind that so-called. So-called is not the right expression. But the movement that was called the new wave of British heavy metal.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, Persian Risk was one of those bands that was starting in some bands, of course, made it further than others, like Iron Maiden being Iron Maiden, and that's pretty much like the standard. That those iconic covers and the character Ed. Maybe one of the reasons why I also want to have a mascot here.
Definitely.
That definitely comes a bit from the metal world, because I love that. I thought it was such a genius thing, having something that was larger than life, larger than the band themselves. So yeah, Carl is a really, really cool guy, really humble, really down to earth, really very, very kind heart, very sensitive guy. And I like working with people like that, because these are people that I can connect more with, like just try to I guess really working with everyone here just taught me a lot about myself, because it was also an exercise in human relationships. It's just trying to figure out, okay, maybe this approach is not the best one. How do I get the best out of this person? Because I want him to be himself, and then ultimately, sometimes you just learn to not push squares through circles. Sometimes there are people who are like, oh yeah, this works. That's a great idea. Bam, here we go. Amazing. And then sometimes you need a little bit more of that, that first clash needs to happen. So then it's like, let's
That's where the creative spark comes from, in a way. And sometimes the collaboration seem like a great idea, and you could be friends, and it could work when you're having a beer or having a conversation. Then when it actually comes to creating, you might be at complete loggerheads, or just not share a vision, or not find those moments where you overlap and things. And I think the more extreme the worlds that you're coming from, the more likely that possibly could happen, that you're either going to get a spark or a clash.
Yeah, that definitely. I'm glad that I didn't happen, at least with the people that I had on my record. Who else should I mention? Well, of course, Shining from Norway. I love what those guys have been doing forever. Like, it's really cool, because everything, every album is like a different approach. And Jorgen and I, for some reason, became really, really close. Like, it's just Jorgen's the kind of guy that will call me when I'm like after coming back from a party, completely hungover at like 10 a.m. on a Sunday, and he's like calling me. So I have to, I pick up the call. It's like a video call, so it's pointing at the ceiling, and he already knows that it's because I have to fucking put some shorts on before I look at his face, because that is just too weird for me. And he's just laughing his ass off, So that's how it actually went with a collaboration. He's like, hey, yo, so I got this idea. It's like, oh shit, you're naked again. Bro, it's 10 a.m. on a Sunday.
If you can't be naked at any time, then 10 a.m. on a Sunday, that we were all naked at 10 a.m. on a Sunday, really, in a perfect world.
I think so. The spark was really easy with Jorgen, because I think his ideas and my ideas just fit really well. We're sort of like in a bit of the same page, because we want to. He also came from doing a bit more obscure music, so to say, more complex music, and now he's looking into music that's just about party and energy and just bringing life. That's why, sort of like this almost teenage rebellious kind of thing, going from tracks like, I don't know, Fisheye, which is a masterpiece of what they've done, to I Don't Give a Fuck, which is a more of a party anthem, but there's still an element of rebelliousness in it. And when we started putting these sounds together, which was when I did, it started just with me wanting to do a remix for him, because he'd done some stuff for me. And sometimes, I do work swaps, like, hey, you played the sax for me on a track, I'll give you a remix, or do vocals for you, and you do that. It's just sort of a trade economy in a way. And then we're all just splitting royalties when it's possible. And if not, then okay, then I keep the royalties here, you keep the royalties there. And then I try to make sure that everyone's happy. That's something that is very important, being as, keeping myself, because I'm still human and I'm also capable of evil. So whenever I'm seeing that somebody is not happy, I look at myself and I'm like, okay, what am I doing that might not be leading this conversation the best way? What am I doing that is not leading this business the best way? How can we find a middle ground, a common ground? I'm always trying to be as conscious as I can of that.
Yeah.
So with him, it was always really easy because it's just like, we're both each other's yes man, because whatever we'll do, it just fits. So it was really easy working with them. And then there's Mechanical Vein, who's a band that I've been supporting a lot, and artists I've been supporting a lot because they're also pursuing that sort of metal and bass sound. And they came to me because they started a label as well, and they wanted me to do some mix and master jobs. And then, I ended up doing a remix for them as well for New Blood that I ended up being picked up by the industrial metal playlist. And it's still there ever since, like, with all these industrial bands that we were talking about, Fear Factory, Static X, and that remix is still there. So, I was like, I think we're hitting a chord here. They are still coming from a bit of a different world, but they also have, I can see the same struggle in what they're doing, like too metal or too industrial to be drum and bass, or too drum and bass to be industrial. So we end up playing for like the gothic scene, for example, in the UK, which is great, to be honest. I mean, if it sort of fits, I'm a mask wearing musician playing electronic beats with guitars. That sort of sounds like industrial, even though it's not exactly what was the intention.
It fits within that realm, though, doesn't it? The dots can be joined in that type of way.
Yeah. And it happened with Mechanical Vein, and I'm really happy because those guys, in my opinion, they're really, really cool guys. They have great ideas. I think this Death by the Baseline was based off when we were talking about this, like maybe having a collaboration. It was like, listen, man, I'm so packed, I cannot start ideas. But if you have a demo of something that I could turn into something that could be a song, just let me hear your demos. And he sends me this demo, and I hear this line, feel the noise, we crush the void, we're gonna drop Death by the Baseline. I was like, Death by the Baseline, that's genius. Yeah. So I took that, and he had some really cool sounds as well in there, and I was like, dude, like, I think most of what this needs is like structure, mix, master, and some extra bit of chunks right there. But he had pretty much the ideas laid out. It almost felt like he gave me a sample pack, and I built the track from there and added a bit of my own samples to make it, of course, to make it a bit more in my direction. But it felt like that. It was pretty much like I took a bunch of chaos and I just put order into it.
Yeah.
That was done within like a day, actually. It was really easy.
Go on. He gave you the ingredients and you did the cooking in that type of
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you
go. Like that. I hear a lot of collaborations like that. Well, someone will just send, right, here are all my drums, here are all my basses, here are a bunch of pads, here are a bunch of things that I've not used in any other tracks. Do you want to use any of these? And I've heard a lot of collaborations come about in that type of way, which is very, very different to the more kind of organic way that people would assume a collaboration would be, really. Yeah. But if it's got two of you, if it's got creations from both of you in it, then it works, really, isn't it? And sometimes that's better to have that sense of space and a completely fractured sense of perspective. You're going to come in, you heard that one little vocal snippet and thought, boom, he would never ever think of doing that. That's just come out as a lyric there in that type of way. And that's, I love that way of completely subverting somebody else's creativity in a way that they could never dream of. That's where, like, strength in numbers and the power of collaborations really works, doesn't it? In very, very strange ways, in different ways.
I prefer that myself. And I think I also learned, that was something that I learned when one of the first people that I collaborated with, like sort of like an official sense, was Counter-Strike. They helped me a lot with that track, Hardcore Will Never Die, which was my first signing to Human Imprint back in the day. So that's why I said it's not something that I've only done on my own. I definitely had people who supported me along the way, and I still hold them in, like, they're still my heroes.
Yeah. Go on.
So when we started collaborating, basically he just told me his formula to help when it comes to like egos and things clashing in the studio. He's like, if it's your release, you finish the track. If it's my release, I finish the track. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
It's as simple as that. Yeah.
Because the cooking, the final cooking, that final sort of it's gonna sound redundant, but I guess I don't have a better word. Final finish, the finish you're gonna give it. That's what's gonna make it sound more like you, right? So in my case, all the all the finishes in the tracks, they are Zardonic. Like it was all like my engineering, my way of producing things, my way of like placing things in a mix. But then I pretty much had ingredients from everybody else, sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on the case. So in the case of Death by the Baseline, I think was most of the ingredients that was Mechanical Vein. And I guess if I was the case that I am collabing with other people, I would also just let him finish the track. I haven't done that in a while, admittedly. I have to say I got a little bit too comfortable with like remixing or finishing tracks on my own. I have to maybe remember, how to let go sometimes as well. But I had to do that when I did the remixes for Fear Factory, because Dino Casares wanted to have a mix master engineer do the whole thing. It was a guy that came from the metal world.
Right.
So they are tracks that sound more like a metal album, and I get that. It's an album that's still catered for the Fear Factory audience. These tracks are like not club mixes. These are tracks that would not necessarily fare that well in a club, because they feel more like a metal album. They're not, the way the subs hit or the drums hit, they're not the same as
totally different dynamic, isn't it? It's a totally different art, really.
Yeah.
And I think to go back to the 90s, and it was something that new metal never gelled with me, because by the time new metal came through in the early 2000s, I was a raver. I was fully into electronic music. So 90s metal hit with much more of that kind of groove that we were talking about. Certainly the metal that I was into in the 90s had more of a boom, like a hit to it and a groove to it. Whereas new metal was much more and it moved with the technology, the speakers that people were using, the technology that people were using, the digitalization of everything. That's why new metal came from a kind of different world, and it felt too alien to me, because I wanted that. I guess it's the analog kind of punch, really, that I'd come from metal, and then using vinyl and listening to sound system music in nightclubs at the time. That was why new metal didn't work for me. It's a very, very,
you were used to that. You were used to that. But here's the funny thing, though. I mean, you would believe that I would probably favor more of the bands that were actually mixing metal and electronic music. Most of the bands that came from the metal world and used electronic elements, I actually didn't like them very much. Like Linkin Park. I know they're like pioneers at the forefront. I mean, they did great music, and Chester Bennington, bless his soul, he was a really talented vocalist, but the music just never resonated with me. Limp Bizkit, same thing. I could see the musicians for what they were. Like, it was like, yeah, dude, this is a great guitar player. This is a great bass player. This is a great drummer. I'm not a fan of the vocalist. I'll be honest, I am not a fan of the way Fred Durst works. But then again, I'm pretty sure his vocals would work really well in a track like mine. Like it's an energy that sort of blends in well, but it was just not what resonated with me. Like whilst I was trying to find out what works with drum and bass, I was on the other hand and listening to, as you said, the more like street metal, sort of call it. That's sort of like Biohazard, Pantera, Sepultura, Machine Head. That was also my thing. And then I went a bit into death metal, like Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, and all the black metal bands, the Norwegian guys that were like, these were people like you could see why these bands were actually scaring parents. They were actually getting involved. Like, I see these memes these days, these reels that say, oh, for example, people say metalheads are evil, and then you see a mosh pit of people like wearing, I don't know, freaking what's his face,
onesies or something.
Yeah, onesies or something like that. Yeah, man. Okay, let's be honest. Yeah, that's happening right now. But yeah, in the 90s, metal was actually a problem. Like, people were burning churches. They were crucifying teenagers on live shows. Gorgoroth, a Norwegian band, they did that. Actual crucified teenagers, like nailed to crosses. This was a thing, like animal blood, like the actual head of an actual how do you call this animal? Jesus Christ, a pig.
Really?
Swine heads hanging on stage, rotting on stage. This was all about, that's why it was called extreme music. It was all about being as extreme as you humanly could. Live sex on stage, like it was actually about that back in the day. I mean, maybe not necessarily what it was mainstream, but then Marilyn Manson took that a little bit into the mainstream, maybe not as much as some other people did, but he was a sort of say
extremist.
he was an extremist in a way. He brought a lot of shock value to the music, because that was the whole idea. It was about making things that were as shocking and as I would almost say like anxiety inducing as possible. Like, imagine seeing a freaking teenager that even like, puts himself for it, crucified on a stage. Like, this is something like,
I was unaware of that. I mean, the animal blood and the live sex I knew about, but not the crucifixion. The
Gorgoroth did that. They were banned in a bunch of countries back in the day. Even like before cancel culture became a hashtag on Twitter, this was already like a banned.
Being cancelled.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, because that's a bit. I love the music they did, but even I have to admit, like, whoa, like, what the fuck? That's not all right.
This is where we find our limits, when someone has taken it beyond the limits, and that's when you know what you're comfortable with in that type of way, really, at an extreme level. I mean, where do you go next now? The album came out, like we're talking now, and the album hasn't been out for a week yet. Probably by the time this come out, the album would have settled with people for within a month, but it's still very, very, very new news. This is the worst question I always ask, and people hate me asking it. What comes next? Because you're just living with the album. You should be celebrating the release of this album and not having to be pushed for what's the next thing. No,
you're actually right.
Type of consumerism way, but
what is
the next thing?
But I mean, you're on the money right there, because the funny part is that now that the album's out, like, I had to almost be reminded of it. Like, oh shit, that was like finally coming out. Like, I am a year ahead of that right now. That album was submitted and finalized by the Q3 2022 or something, and it just came out right now. And ever since, I've done a bunch of other stuff. Like, I think by the time this interview is out, maybe I'm doing 2 remixes also for the band Monuments. Was also produced by Mick Gordon, as you know, and one remix for their song Nefarious that I did together with Pythias. It's one of our first collaborations. It's
wow.
I think a lot of people are gonna hate us, because he did something really cheeky which he hadn't done before. It actually works. I hate it, but it works. I'm able to live with some things I don't like, and it's dubstep, like this American style sort of like blah, blah, bam, blah. I never was a fan of that. I'm sorry. I respect people who can do it. And when I hear something being like, okay, this sounds like the stuff these guys are putting out there, this is gonna work. Let's figure it out. And but it was so like excruciating for the set, because I'm like, no, man, I have to listen to this stuff. We're like, I just wanted to get it done as soon as possible. But it worked. Like, we made it work in a way that we're both happy with. It sounds great. The band loves it. And then there's the other remix, which is a bit more of an experimental melodic approach. It's a bit more celebrating what the original band is about, being as boundary pushing as possible. It's a very progressive band, so they're always, there's many layers to the composition that they do. It's very, very complex, not dance floor friendly, but we gave them one of each, like something that will just kill it in the dance floor and get all these headbangers out there. It's gonna be cool. It's definitely gonna be cool. And then there's the other one, which is more like sort of say challenging your mind in a bit. And what else is there? There's also a remix for Melvinator. That's Eric Melvin, formerly of NoFX, his new solo project. I am just finishing a remix during the time of this interview. I'm in the middle of that. I have to deliver it this week. It's also going to be a very like racing dance floor one. There's another one for Cell Dweller. There's a tribute to Black Label Society. There's all sorts of things really that are coming out soon, and things that I also finished. A soundtrack for Final Fury, which is a new fighting game for VR. It's in MetaQuest on beta right now. What else is there? Remixes for Voitions and DJ Hyper.
You are king of the remixes. And I'm worried because we're running out of time. Well, we've got way over time. I mean, a week we could spend an hour, 2 hours just talking about your remixes, really. And you
Thanks,
know,
man.
like unofficial or official, but they've been a huge part of your output and how you work and how you bridge these two worlds. And this is quite a nice way of looping us back to where we started, really.
Yeah.
Remixes have been a big key for you to enable you to join these dots, show these similarities, and bring the worlds together in a way that I don't think any other kind of art form can. The remix has been really good for you in that type of way, hasn't it?
For sure, because to me, remixing was, I mean, it just depends on what you really call a remix. Some people say a remix should be something completely different. I'm a bigger fan of remixes that are a bit more true to the original sometimes. I mean, well, there's always, there's layers, yeah, but um, what I always thought was, I always wanted to have a metal band or a black metal band or whatever. Like that was my thing. And when my parents were not very happy with that, because I was not going to be a musician and I was not going to play the electric guitar because that's satanic music and I have to study and I have to be a lawyer and I have to be. And I know they meant well. They were actually right, you know, especially right now that we have a looming threat of a total war. Explain to me how a DJ is going to be useful in the face of an apocalypse. We're going to need the builders. We're going to need engineers. We're going to need doctors. Like, so it wasn't exactly that far off. I mean, all of these careers, like, are especially like creative careers. This is a field that is possible in a peaceful society, especially like because it's because this is when you have the time to do it. Whereas like you're not under pressure, like under like to like rebuild civilization, for example, or like fighting a war. So I'm blessed that we are in this time right now, and I'm blessed that I'm able to do that. But back then, you know, my parents, they just weren't so sure that this was going to be good at all. They would never understand it. Eventually, you know, even before my dad passed away, he was like mighty proud of me. He was telling everybody like he was Zardonic's dad. And but you know, in the beginning, yeah, they were not so sure. So my solution was, how do I become a solo act? So I was like secretly doing this stuff with just a keyboard, trying to do metal with synthesizers. That was the whole origin story of all my projects. I was like trying to do metal in a way that sounds more digital. If I want to play a track by Sepultura, but these guys are playing something else, well, how do I bring that to a dance floor? Well, I'm just going to add some drum and bass drums to it and see how that works. And that's how it started. I just wanted to originally play metal. And I was like, how do I bring that into this setting that I have now? Friends that want me to, you know, are giving me the opportunity to play some tracks. How do I put together these worlds? And it all started, yeah, out of necessity, really, I would say, because I really wanted to do that. And you know,
look at where it's brought you. And actually, like, this is the final question now. Next year is 20 years of Zardonic.
It's bullshit. It's bullshit. There's no way. You know, listen, man, I'm still like a little fanboy on my computer in Venezuela with like AOL Instant Messenger open, waiting to see if, like, I don't know, Diesel Boy was online so I can shoot my demos. You know, I don't know, man. I kind of feel like, I mean, I'm glad because it works for marketing. Like, hey, you know, if you're looking at drum and bass and metal, like, this is the guy. Like, hell yeah, I like that. I'm not going to say I don't like it. But deep inside my heart, to me, it's like 20 years of Zardonic, and I don't know. I am like 20 years old in my head still. Yeah. So I don't know. To me, Marilyn Manson was like happened yesterday. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like, definitely. But I think when you do something you love, and I'm testament to this as well. Like, you know, most people, when I tell them my age, they're like, "No way, you're not that old." And I think when you do something you love, and I'm a good few years older than you. If your age on Wikipedia is correct, then I'm like almost 10 years older than you. Like, so yeah, I mean, is your Wikipedia age the correct age? I don't.
Yeah, it's 37.
37. Yeah, I'm 44. I'm 45 in like a couple of months' time. Like,
hey, bro, we're all still young. We're all kids.
If you do something that you love, then you do preserve, because it's the energy that you put out, it's the characteristics. You know, luckily gray hair is only just coming onto my beard now, and I shave my head and I'm balding anyway, so that hasn't been a thing, and I wear a hat and stuff like that. But I think it's the energy that you put out. Like, I think gray hair is like, you know, that's one thing that makes you look older, and you can't help that. But other than
I got a bunch in my beard already. But you know what, dude, if Sean Connery got away with it, I think we can rock it. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Let's rock that gray beard.
I think that's a perfect note, a really random and brilliantly perfect note to end on, really. Let's rock grey beards, and when our beards get greyer, let's do another interview. This has been an absolutely amazing conversation, and it could have carried on for a lot longer. There's still loads I want to ask, so I'll save that for another time. Federico, Zardonic, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, brother man. Have a great one.
Brilliant.